Trump threatens tariffs again, while Canadian political leaders prepare to react. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
The top news stories
and conversations that matter to you.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
Another day and more threats from U.S. President Donald Trump about tariffs. Trump was in Miami, Florida, hosting Republican members of Congress of one of his country clubs, and he outlined his latest views on why he thinks the United States needs tariffs on imports from other countries. Trump claims the United States was richer when it took in more revenue from tariffs than income taxes.
The foreign producer has contributed nothing to the growth or development of this country. So if you want to share with the citizens of the United States our home market, then you must pay for the privilege of doing it. In other words, you have to pay for the privilege of coming into our country, taking our jobs, taking our product, destroying our countries. We mentioned North Carolina, the furniture business, what they've done to these great artisans. I used to go down to North Carolina all the time to buy furniture for hotels that I was building, and they had the most incredible artisans. That whole thing was wiped out by China mostly, but others, and just wiped out. But it's going to come back. It's going to come roaring back. It's all going to come roaring back. We're going to put tariffs on outside countries and outside people that really mean us harm.
President Trump then went on to talk about the American automotive industry, saying it's being wiped out. Trump in recent weeks has said the United States doesn't need vehicles that are made in Canada, although his target yesterday seemed to be the auto sector in Mexico.
So they were going to build cars and send them into the United States for no tax or very little tax and destroy Detroit, just destroy the rest of it, what's left of it, because they've already taken, Mexico's taken 32% of our business over years, over 30 years. And the other one is Canada. Canada's taken massive amounts of, they said they send us millions of cars. We don't need them for that. We want to have the cars made in Detroit or South Carolina or many other locations, whether it's union or not union.
During his speech, which was more than an hour long, President Trump said he would put tariffs on a range of items from a range of countries with products including computer chips, pharmaceuticals, steel and aluminum, and critical minerals. Back in Ottawa, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly maintained the Canadian government's number one goal right now is to avoid the tariffs altogether, and that negotiations are happening behind the scenes.
When it comes to preventing tariffs, this is our number one priority, and we're working at it every day. Now, we believe that diplomacy can work, and that's why we're having private conversations, and we won't negotiate in front of the public. We believe that our arguments are strong. I think that I've had numerous conversations where the reaction was actually very positive, but meanwhile, there's still a lot of work. This administration in the U.S. is very unpredictable, so we have to be ready and working on both fronts. Like I was saying, preventing tariffs and at the same time working on our resistance.
Joly would go on to say that President Trump is using the threat of tariffs because he knows it puts pressure on other countries, but she said Canada has leverage.
We have also different levers. We are the biggest customer to the U.S. We are the biggest customer in 36 countries, 36 states within the U.S. So there are lots of allies in the U.S. and also in Washington, and that's why we're doing the work to make sure that ultimately we're able to get to a win-win situation. That's why we're addressing the concerns regarding the border, which is really important, and that we should never forget that this is a priority. It is a priority for us because we believe that we have to stop any form of illegal guns coming from the U.S. and also any form of irregular migration coming from the U.S. And meanwhile, we'll continue to do the work on making sure that ultimately facts prevail, particularly when it comes to the fact that the U.S. has a trade surplus with Canada when we exclude energy exports from Canada.
On border issues, the new minister in Ottawa in charge of that file is Liberal MP David McGuinty. He expects to meet with Trump's new border czar, Tom Homan, sometime this week, and other national security officials in the Trump administration.
The plan that we are implementing is multifaceted. It involves political outreach, official outreach, and operational outreach. So clearly, I'll be meeting with, eventually, for example, the new Department of Homeland Security Secretary, Ms. Nome. We'll be talking to Tom Homan, we expect this week. At the same time, we have officials who are in and out of Washington, D.C., working with our American counterparts. And operationally, the CBSA and the RCMP are in constant touch with their counterpart organizations in the United States. So we're making huge progress. This plan is a plan which is, of course, international between Canada and the United States, but it's also a plan between different orders of government in this country. We've reached out to and engaged every single province in the country. They are engaged in the case of Alberta, Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Quebec. They're making, for example, some of their police authorities available. Police of local jurisdiction are helping us on the border. This is a very, very good thing, and they should be commended for doing so, because it really is a Team Canada response.
It is also being reported today the Canadian government is preparing a multi-billion-dollar pandemic-style relief program for workers and businesses that could be impacted by U.S. tariffs. But two sources told the Globe and Mail that any new funding for such assistance measures wouldn't be able to flow right away. That's because Parliament is prorogued until March 24th. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know, and this is News Radio.
You have questions
Now You Know with Rob Snow has the answers.
on News Radio.
There's a lot to talk about today with Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. Welcome back.
My great pleasure, Rob.
So, look, the government continues to insist everything is on the table. Retaliatory tariffs being considered. Chrystia Freeland released her own plan yesterday, $200 billion action plan for tariffs. Mark Carney suggesting perhaps using electricity exports as leverage. Columnist in the National Post, John Ivison, outlines a long list of potential trade weapons that Canada could use. What do you think of all of this?
I'm just sitting here, and I said this very seriously. I'm just sitting here, I'm gobsmacked. Okay, I understand that Pure Land politicians who've never done anything but politics aren't going to be familiar with the research. But someone like Carney, there's no excuse whatsoever. And for Chrystia Freeland, who was supposedly a financial journalist, the Hub, which is the digital publication, released a summary today of response by various economists. I was always aware, I already knew the literature because I've looked at it for years. I just didn't remember it, and I hadn't taken the time yet to go look it up again. Fortunately, the Hub published it today, a summary. Professor Steinberg, who is an associate prof of economics at U of T, and U of T is considered Canada's most outstanding university. I'll just read what he's just a summary from one of his major papers on this. Professor Steinberg. I found that 25% tariffs on Canadian exports will reduce by our GDP by about 5 times that of the United States. This is in a Referee Journal article published several years ago, because he's been studying this on and off. However, dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs, as proposed by Chrystia Freeland, on American exports would also hurt the Canadian economy about 5 times more. The reason is due to the asymmetry between U.S. and Canada, because Canada is 1/10 the size of the United States. And then he goes on and says, instead of doing any kind of tariffs, retaliation, we should be reducing distortions such as elimination of provincial barriers to trade, that sort of thing. I've been saying from the get-go, from before any of the politicians took a position, just because I've been teaching international business strategy for years and years and years, and I go look at the data all the time, and I'm talking the American data, not bloviating politicians or even bloviating think tanks. I go look at the actual trade flows and the size of the two economies. The U.S. is the largest economy on planet Earth. larger
Right.
than China, significantly larger than China. It's 18 trillion. U.S. is 25 trillion. Some say it's 28 trillion, depending on how you measure the GDP. There's no question it's the colossus. There's no question the Federal Reserve drives the currency valuation of the U.S. dollar against all the other currencies. It's the most important central bank in the world. The dollar, the U.S. dollar, is the international reserve currency, not one, the only international currency that's used to settle accounts between countries for oil and
Right.
minerals and so forth. So the idea that we are equal and we can stand up and whack the Americans and put as much pain on them as they'll put on us is delusional, and it's anti-intellectual, it's anti-evidence-based. And while it's one thing for Premier Ford, I'm not being a snob, okay? I've full disclosure, I voted for him in the past. But, he's not an intellectual. So I don't expect him to go and know about economics policies, papers published by professors in economics departments. Mark Carney has a PhD in economics from Cambridge. He should know better. There's no excuse for his position. No
I think it's
excuse
Oxford,
at
actually.
all.
Right. I think it's Oxford, actually, where his PhD is from. But nevertheless. Sorry? I think it's Oxford. I think his PhD's from Oxford.
That should be. I thought it was Cambridge.
Minor detail. Minor detail. But look, there's this idea, and I mean, it's Iveson's column's really good today. Freeland has said it. Others have said it. We can hurt the Americans if we really want to.
I think that. By the way, I've never said that they will not feel any pain. I've never said that.
We can send their gas prices higher. We can give them rolling blackouts in New England and New York, and this sort of stuff. If we really wanted to.
Well, I'm not so certain, and I'll tell you why. First off, people don't realize this. People do not know this. I bet you most Canadians do not know this. I'll bet you most journalists don't know this. The United States is independent oil and gas producer. It exports more oil and gas than it imports. Does it import oil? Yes, because trading it's advantageous for heavy oil. Are they dependent on Canada turning out the lights? No. And on the electricity, there's tons of natural gas generators that burn natural gas to produce electricity. Why are they importing electricity from Quebec? Because it's cheaper. That's why.
But, it's cheaper. Plus, it also, because it's hydroelectricity, it helps them meet their greenhouse gas targets. There's a green component to it.
The Northeast are very democratic governments, Democratic Party running, and they're very green. But the idea that it's going to catastrophically ruin, I've got the data, Rob. I've got the data from the U.S.
Okay. I'm just suggesting some of the narratives that are out there.
The narratives are mostly false. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. I got you. Okay. Look, when we come back, I think this is a blockbuster report in the Globe and Mail today. I find it really interesting. There were hints of this a few weeks ago. Think the CERB, think CEBA loan programs, Canada wage subsidy, all those programs that were around to help businesses, to help Canadians weather the worst of the pandemic and the economic lockdowns. Under consideration, sources are telling the Globe and Mail. If workers and Canadian businesses are hit with tariffs, want your reaction to that. When we come back, Professor Ian Lee is here from the Sprott School at Carleton University. This is News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
We are back with Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. So in the Globe and Mail today, there's reporting that the federal government is planning a multi-billion-dollar pandemic-style bailout, is the word used, bailout, for workers and businesses. Let me read it a little bit here. The government expects U.S. tariffs could lead to mass layoffs, drive up the cost of goods for consumers. Canadian companies will likely respond not only by cutting jobs, but by curtailing production. Businesses would lose money. Some would have to close. The sources said the emergency measures would help Canadians pay for rent and groceries and allow businesses to pay bills and meet payroll. So it sounds a lot like the measures that were in place during the economic lockdowns during the pandemic. CERB, wage subsidy program, CEBA loan program. We all remember these programs, Professor. What do you think about this?
I'm extremely cynical, and I'll explain why. In the pandemic, that was an external exogenous. Use the academic language. Exogenous, from outside, external shock. Nobody planned, nobody determined that there was going to be a pandemic. Nobody started a pandemic in Canada. It was just an act of God, or whatever you want to call it, like a natural disaster. In this instance, I deeply and profoundly believe that the Liberals want to see this happen. Oh. Trump 3 days ago, 3 days ago, said, I'm willing to start negotiations right now. They've said in this leak, somebody's saying in the government, that the tariffs impact on Canada will be catastrophic. I agree. I've said it too. So that should be the obvious evidence, and it is the obvious evidence, that we must avoid a tariff war at all costs. Can anyone listening point to any statement by any Liberal in this country saying we must at all costs stop this and we must get to negotiations immediately? Those words, negotiations or new trade agreement or new customs, have not crossed their lips whatsoever in public. They don't want to go to negotiations. They don't want to stop the thing. They think that they look back, I think, with nostalgia, the early years, the first year or two, their poll numbers were soaring when they were rolling out. Trudeau was at the microphone every 3 days or fourth day or 5 days announcing the latest alphabet soup program of government support, handing out billions and billions and billions of dollars. Needless to say, it was very popular. You know, you hand out that kind of staggering amounts of money, and of course it's going to be popular. I think that they see this as a Hail Mary on their part. The only thing that's going to save them from catastrophic defeat in the election of 2025, which we know is going to happen, is something like this. And so they see this as when I say Hail Mary, it's desperate, it's high stakes, it's very high risk, gambling the country's future by not going to negotiations, and they haven't made a whisper of going to negotiations. They haven't responded to Trump.
Chrystia Freeland, let me interrupt because we only have about a minute left. Chrystia Freeland said in the Washington Post, in her opinion piece in the Washington Post, floated an idea kind of like this, that the money used to fund such programs would come from counter tariffs. Yeah. The Americans will support our people, and you'll pay for it.
Exactly.
Americans.
In other words, they're not even considering the most obvious solution. You only go to tariffs as literally as the last option. They are treating it as the first go-to option. You only go to tariff retaliation if
maybe that's because
else
it's inevitable.
fails, if negotiations fail. It's the equivalent of a strike. You don't I'd say when the union goes into negotiation, the first thing you do, we're going on strike, and then maybe we'll talk after about negotiations. No. You go into negotiations and you try and you try and you try to have a deal, and then when all else fails, you go on strike. That's how it works. With trade, you work assiduously, night and day, for months on end to have a deal before you ever go to, and that's why it's so rare, by the way. It is extremely rare to have trade wars. The Liberals, are preparing already. The tariffs haven't even arrived. The crisis hasn't arrived, and they're leaking stories about how they're going to stand up to Trump and we're going to have a trade war. That's what you do as a last resort, not a first resort. So what this tells me is that this is what they want to happen. And they want it to happen because they believe it's going to save them in the election this year. That they'll be Captain Canada.
Okay, all right. That's interesting.
It's very cynical of they're putting their own party ahead of the greater good of Canada.
Got to go on that point. Thank you, Professor. We'll speak next week. This is News Radio.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now you know with Rob Snow.
Returns on News Radio. The Newsday Panel.
Yes, it is time for our Newsday Panel with Andrew Brander, Vice President at Crestview Strategy. How are you today, Andrew?
Hey, Rob. Doing well.
That's good. Jordan Paquette is here, Senior Consultant, Blue Sky Strategy Group. Great to hear from you, Jordan Paquette.
Great to be here, Rob. Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
So, let's start with some of the newest news. First of all, the final report from the foreign interference inquiry's been released. Now, it was released less than an hour ago. It's 7 volumes. It makes 51 recommendations. And as much as I like to read this kind of material, I haven't had a chance to get through it all already. But some of the big news is that there is no evidence of traitors in Parliament conspiring with foreign countries, dismissing suggestions to the contrary. So let's listen to Justice Hogue just moments ago.
Some may have benefited from the support of a foreign state, sometimes without knowing anything about it. But again, so far, this does not seem to have led to any real gains for the states involved. Nor have I seen any evidence to suggest that there are currently so-called traitors in Parliament. While I saw evidence of some concerning behavior, the evidence does not show any MPs plotting with foreign states against Canada's interests.
Okay, so I guess we can all breathe a big sigh of relief. There are no traitors in Parliament. But here's among her recommendations that I want to run by you right now, because there is a leadership race happening right now with the Liberal Party. Preparations are underway for a federal election, so there are nomination races for the various political parties happening across the country. And soon enough, sometime this year, whatever that will be, we will be into a federal election. One of the recommendations is a prohibition on allowing foreigners other than permanent residents to vote in nomination or leadership contests. Do you see that as being something all the political parties could agree on and move in rather short order to adopt as all-party policy? What do you think, Andrew? Why don't you take that one, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first place to start with answering that question would be to ask if the Liberals are doing that, right? So you mentioned 51 recommendations. In addition to that, it should be noted that includes a separate list of 8 other recommendations from the Chief Electoral Officer. And that's where this recommendation comes from, the one that you're referencing specifically. So if you look at the ongoing Liberal leadership, it seems that they had, kind of adopted some of these recommendations, even though they weren't published. But only recently have they done that, such as restricting the vote to citizens and permanent residents only. I don't think they're enforcing the second recommendation around that, which sort of revolves around requiring a declaration from those individuals in terms of that status. And
in other
so
words, you have to sign a declaration. Yes, I am a Canadian citizen, or I am a permanent resident, and the recommendation is the party collect those declarations and maintain a record of those declarations for at least 7 years.
Right, and that's exactly it. Which sort of brings me back to the point that I was going to make around enforcement for or adoption of these recommendations, which is the political parties in very large part. 95% of the work that's done by political parties are done by local volunteers at the local riding level. Very, very few, the more requirements that you are therefore applying to political parties, the more resistance I think you're going to see, not from any one particular party, but probably from all of them, because that obviously takes away resources that the party wants to be using on other things. So really, out of all these recommendations, there's more than 10 of them that seek to introduce specifically new rules that the political parties should be enforcing, or point to Elections Canada having a heavier hand in the governance of the political parties. And I think those are going to be really hard to enforce, and political parties are going to be reluctant to comply. Again, not because they want to be nefarious, but because there's cumbersome procedures, and in largely volunteer organizations, these require a lot of resources, really hard to manage, and ultimately, the governance of political parties should be left to the members to decide what those look
Interesting.
like.
How do you see it, Jordan Piquet?
So some of this is what political parties are already doing beyond, I suppose, the Liberal Party. To Andrew's point, and they have an ongoing leadership race now. So I think it's incumbent on them, of the ones who created this commission and now are looking at its recommendations to try and find ways to implement that into their current race. Just because somebody signs a declaration saying, yes, I'm confirming that I'm a citizen or permanent resident, doesn't necessarily mean that they are either. So, I mean, these systems could still be open to abuse. But it is, I think, certainly coming back to it, of what political parties can do on their own, and that is have these processes in place to ensure that these processes are open to abuse. I agree with Andrew that these don't necessarily have to be enforced by courts. I mean, the courts have determined for a long time that political parties are their own private clubs. They can basically do what they want. But if they want to have the competence of the electorate when it comes time for a general election, then there's certain measures that they should be taken. Luckily, the Conservative Party has been doing this for a long time, requiring strictly donations that come from a verified account or a personal credit card, that you have to sign up, that you have to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident to sign up. And it takes a long time for them to vet through this process. So I think there's something that some of these other parties can also learn from that at the same time. But I do want to get over to... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's really easy to say in principle. It's really hard to enforce in practice, right? From a political organizer standpoint, you even when elections are fully expected, planned, land on a fixed election date, you'll see this, in every election cycle. Every political party is left scrambling to find candidates at the last minute because someone decides not to quit their job or someone else enters the race or whatever it is, right? And their ability to then find a candidate, oftentimes this just comes to like an appointment process, right? Because they just need someone on the ballot. So like all the rules at that point kind of go out the window and they're left scrambling trying to find someone. So like good luck to anyone trying to enforce these types of rules. Again, it's a lot easier to talk about than enforce.
All right, we'll be right back. I'm Rob Snow. It's our Newsday panel, and this is News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
It's our Newsday panel. Two great political people are here. Andrew Brander, Vice President, Crestview Strategy. Jordan Piquet, Senior Consultant at Blue Sky Strategy Group. Lots of experience with campaigns and working on Parliament Hill. So here's a very interesting development to me. According to a news report, the Liberal government is preparing a multi-billion-dollar pandemic-style relief program to help Canadian workers and businesses impacted by Trump's tariffs. So think a return of wage subsidy programs or CERB-style programs or CEBA loan programs, these sorts of things. Given the current context that we have in our parliament and minority government, I wonder how this would play politically. Let's say hundreds of thousands of people are thrown out of work or factories are closing. And the government at the time, let's say, a new Liberal leader who just happens to be prime minister now comes to, say, the New Democrats or the Bloc and says, we want support for a multi-billion-dollar pandemic-style relief program. Can we count on your support? I mean, could, for example, the New Democrats really say no to helping hard-hit Canadian workers, thereby offering a lifeline not only to workers and businesses, but maybe this minority Liberal government as well? What do you think, Jordan?
So here's the problem, Rob. I mean, we still don't know what's coming, if anything, on February 1st. But the big issue is that Parliament is shuttered until March 24th. And the only person responsible for that is the Prime Minister and the government of the day right now. So it's well and good to talk about these potential subsidies that could come, but the Liberals have basically shuttered government and the ability to pass any of these measures or attempt to negotiate any of these measures until the end of March, where we'll be almost 2 months past these alleged tariffs that could come in. So, I mean, now Canadians are all having to kind of play the waiting game while the Liberal Party sorts out its own internal leadership crisis, while everybody else just sits and waits. Coming to the NDP, I mean, it's completely a wild card right now about what they would do. They've committed to bringing down the government at the earliest opportunity, forcing an election, putting their ideas on the line compared to the other parties, which would be the most appropriate thing to do in this particular case. A new government should come in, get a new mandate, and put their own ideas forward, as opposed to just trying to do this horse trading for the next. I
guess I just wonder. We're hearing it from all the opposition leaders, and no, the time's up for the Liberals. Their time is going to defeat them as soon as we have the chance. But okay, but what if this is on the table, and what if it's needed? Andrew Brander, what would you say?
Yeah, so they're going to defeat the government because the politicians never gone back on their word, right? So, I read this story, and it's like the Liberal government preparing a multi-billion-dollar pandemic-style relief program, and I guess the obvious question to me immediately was who's creating this program? Like, what can the Liberals actually be preparing when they don't have a leader? Is the new leader going to come in and be like, oh, yeah, no, I actually didn't approve this, or I didn't think that it would go this far, or whatever? Like, who's signing off on this? Because obviously, practically speaking, to Jordan's point, every party is going to have a response to these tariffs. Every leader is going to have a different opinion of what that response is, how big it is, how it's scaled, what sectors it targets, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's fair to assume everyone is going to have a response to this. And I'd agree completely with Jordan. The only way to get buy-in from Canadians for that is going to be through the process of an election. So let's hear all of their plans, whoever the new replacement Justin Trudeau is, alongside, the vision of the NDP, the vision of the Conservatives, and everyone else, and bring it to the ballot box, because I think that's exactly what needs to happen.
Okay. Well, we don't have to wait for an election in Ontario. It's essentially underway now. First full day of campaigning will be tomorrow. Doug Ford has pulled the plug, and we are on our way. February 27th, I believe, will be voting day in Ontario. We'll ask our panelists, well, not so much how they like Doug Ford's chances, but why is he calling an election at all? When we come back, this is News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
Back with Andrew Brander and Jordan Piquette, our Newsday panelists today. All right, Andrew, you're down there in the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. What do you think about Doug Ford's justification for this early election call? I need a mandate from the people 2.5 years after they gave him a majority government. What do you think about what's going on here?
Look, it's anytime you're leading with such a command in the polls, it's not a bad time to call an election. I do think that if he had missed this window right now, it would become very, very hard for him to justify an earlier election call if he's caught on the other side of a federal election. Right. And if that's the case, he's giving 16 months of Donald Trump a platform. He's giving 13 months more to the what might happen in a change in the federal scene and any implications that come with that. And again, giving 16 months to both Bonnie Crombie and Merritt Stiles, who to quite frankly do anything, because nothing they have done has been able to resonate with voters. And so you always go when it's as close to a sure thing as possible, and that time is now.
Okay. Jordan, what do you think? Why is Doug Ford even calling this election?
Well, I think for some of those reasons that Andrew laid out. I mean, look, for some of the ones that the premier's laid out himself, I think that's at least a good communications line that in order to deal with an incoming Trump administration, we want to make sure we have a strong mandate for the next 4 years to take us past when President Trump's term would be finished. So I think that is a good reason to perhaps communicate that I think a lot of people in Ontario may accept. And also, yes, it takes away the opportunity for the opposition to really get their candidates together, get their policies together, catch them a little bit off guard, and test their readiness too. So yeah, I would agree with Andrew. It's as much of a sure thing. Then he's probably going to go for it right now, which is what's happening. Also, not to mention, I just got a $200 check in my mail yesterday.
Dougie
dollars. So I don't know everybody that got them yet, but I mean, it seems like those will be flowing out during the writ period. So
right. Did you get your check, David? David Smith, did you get your Dougie dollar check yet? The $200?
No, I have not.
No. Oh my gosh. Okay.
And I'm very upset
that's it.
About
David's voting for the New Democrats then.
Got big plans for that money.
Okay. You don't see any risks here for Doug Ford? Well, I mean, any surprise outcomes? 1990, Bob Ray, it's happened.
Rob, of course there's a risk, right? If you look globally in the last year, every incumbent government that faced election saw them lose a share of their vote. They didn't necessarily lose the election, but they lost a share. If you look at Canada, that's the same case here, with the exception of Tim Houston in Nova Scotia. He's the only one that bucked the trend. So of course there's a risk, but that's a small risk.
It's a long shot.
In the calculation of what's to come if he goes 16 months from now.
Okay. All right. Oh, lots of interesting stuff to talk about today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, and we'll speak again soon. Yeah, you too. Andrew Brander is Vice President at Crestview Strategies in Toronto today. Jordan Paquette is a Senior Consultant at Blue Sky Strategy Group, and he is in Ottawa. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. Talkback is coming up right after the news at the top of the hour. Some new topics today, and your calls will be most welcome. Join the discussion right after the news on News Radio.
It's time to talk back
on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
and have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. It's 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. Today's topics are kind of, they're Trump adjacent. Let's put it that way. We'd like to get your take on a couple of things today. One is Canada's strategy to build parts and components for electric vehicles, for EVs. And the other is helping out Canadian workers and Canadian businesses if the Trump administration follows through on tariffs, and what's being reported in the news media about that today. But let's start with EVs. Let's start with electric vehicles. In Canada, there is supposed to be a sales mandate for electric vehicles that is supposed to come into full effect by the year 2035, so in about a decade from now. In the United States, there was what Trump calls a sales mandate for electric vehicles. Some dispute whether that was actually a sales mandate, but the Trump administration has said, by way of executive order, that whatever it was, we're doing away with it. Also in Canada, as you well know, governments, both federal and provincial governments, have committed tens of billions of dollars 2 projects aimed at building factories to make EV components, the most well-known being battery plants in southern Ontario, but also in other parts of the country. So here are some questions for you on the whole situation right now about electric vehicles and where things should go from here. That's what we really want to know. Given what we're hearing from the Trump administration about electric vehicle production, does it still make sense for Canada to have policies that mandate the sale of electric vehicles by the year 2035? And does it make sense for governments, for the federal government, various provincial governments, to provide incentives to automakers and component manufacturers, battery makers, to try and lure them to Canada to build factories for the electric vehicle supply chain? Or would you prefer to see a departure from some, if not all, of these policies? 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. There's been a lot of ink spilled over many years about the EV strategy in this country. And certainly the federal government, led by Mr. Trudeau, is a big believer in the EV revolution. The federal government alone has committed more than $31 billion to build out an EV supply chain. And since 2020 has committed to spend more than $52 billion in various supports to the electric vehicle industry. Provincial governments have committed in excess of $21 billion to various initiatives for the EV supply chain. So, in light of recent events in the United States, we thought it would be timely to ask you, is it time to rethink this strategy and rethink these commitments? What would you say? Would you say, no, the electric vehicle's the way of the future? Vehicles powered by the internal combustion engine that rely on fossil fuels? Those days are coming to an end, and this is the direction that the industry is moving in. And Canadians can either be part of this transition or they can be left behind. And we will lose a valuable industry because if we aren't making electric vehicles, we won't be making any vehicles at all. That's maybe one way to look at it. Or you could say, yes, we should move away from this and rethink this whole strategy about electric vehicles. The industry itself, especially in North America and Europe, appears to be struggling against less expensive electric vehicles that are made in China. Consumers don't want to be told what they can and can't buy. There should be choice about what kind of vehicle people can buy. And it's too much money to commit to one industry, and it's money that would be better spent somewhere else on any other number of government priorities, be that healthcare, education, social welfare, affordable housing. Could be a long list. What would you say? Where would you come down on this one? 1-833-668-2577 on EVs. Another issue today is, what should the government do to help Canadian workers and Canadian businesses that could be impacted by U.S. tariffs? There is a report today. It was the top story in the Globe and Mail. And needless to say, details a little scant, but there's enough information in this story to make it noteworthy. According to 2 unnamed sources, the Trudeau government is preparing what is described as a multi-billion-dollar pandemic-style relief program to help workers and businesses that could be hard hit by Trump's tariffs, if those tariffs do come to pass. And Donald Trump has said recently they could come into effect as soon as February 1st, which is this coming Saturday. Now, that's really all this story says, that they're preparing pandemic-style relief programs. It doesn't say what kind of pandemic-style relief programs, but look, the pandemic wasn't that long ago. I'm sure it's still fresh in everyone's memories what kind of relief programs were on offer. The newspaper points out today it actually uses the word bailout in the headline. And, you know, when the pandemic was first declared, the government moved to shut everything down, lock everyone down. The federal government rolled out an $82 billion aid package. You may remember assistance programs that were available. CERB, $2,000 a month. CEWS, Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. keep workers on the payroll. The Bank of Canada was providing what was called liquidity to make sure banks would keep lending to consumers and businesses. Cost a lot of money back then. Final tally just for CERB was $75 billion. The wage subsidy program was $100 billion. But if people needed $2,000, you can bet they were happy to have it. If businesses needed help paying their workers, business owners and employees were happy to have it. What if we have millions of Canadians who are at risk of losing their jobs or being laid off or seeing factories close from one end of the country to the other? It sounds like the government is seriously considering bringing back some of these programs, like CERB or a wage subsidy program, and we want to know what you think about that. Something you would support, something you would oppose. There are a lot of different angles to a story like that, and we can talk about them as we make our way through the next couple of hours with your help. Again, the number to call today to join the conversation, 1-833-668-2577, 1-833-668-2577. If you've never called before, just mention that to our call screener and we will make your call a priority. It's Talkback. I'm Rob Snow, and this is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Talking about electric vehicles today, government aid for businesses and workers that could be hit by tariffs. Should Canadian governments reverse course on the investments they've been making to build out an electric vehicle supply chain in Canada? What would you say? Would you say, yes, the United States is changing its strategy, so should we? Or would you say, no, the future of the auto industry is electric? We need to be part of the revolution. And as well, would you support pandemic-style assistance programs? Think the CERB, the wage subsidy, to help Canadian workers and businesses that could be hit by these tariffs. The news report that the government is preparing such measures. 1-833-668-2577. Dwayne is in Edmonton, up first today on Talkback. Hi there, Dwayne. You want to talk about EVs? What do you think Canada should do?
I think we should totally abandon that. I mean, if there's companies that still want to carry through with it within their own funds and stuff, that's great. But we need to stop this. I mean, the other programs that they have run, COVID plants that were supposed to be built before that are not being built, and I understand there's some other battery plants that are supposed to go through and they didn't. It's a ridiculous amount of money that we're spending on this kind of stuff. And in terms of the CERB payments and stuff, we cannot spend that kind of money. It's unbelievable.
Okay.
I believe it's
what if the unemployment rate? Let me interrupt there. What if the unemployment rate doubled? We had 12, 13% unemployment.
It was what, 12 or 13%, 14%?
Right.
It was unbelievable. I mean, Alberta survived it back in the early 80s, and I'm sure the rest of the country can survive it too. If it comes down to tariffs that are going to be, if they're going to be that bad, which I don't believe they will be, but should they be that, it's going to be survival of the fittest.
Okay.
That's what it comes down to.
Let me just float one more thing, because this is kind of out there as an idea as well, that any funding for something like a CERB program or a wage subsidy program would come from revenues collected on counter tariffs. So we would be supporting Canadians and businesses with tariff revenue collected on basically U.S. exports. We'll help our people, and the Americans will pay for it. What would you think of that?
I think it would be great, but I do not trust the numbers that are coming out of the government now that they're going to be collecting. Is that number going to be true? Is that going to be a true number? What they say and what they actually get has been in the last 9 to 10 years has been two totally different numbers when you come out when it comes.
That is often the case, sir. That is often the case, isn't it? Yes. So, I mean, you just remember recently our deficit won't be more than $40 billion, and deficit day comes and it's $62 billion, right, Dwayne?
Well, exactly.
So,
where do you end? Where do you end?
Okay, Dwayne. Thank you, Dwayne.
Thank you
for your time. Off to a good start today. Thank you. Keith in Elmira, also on the electric vehicle question today.
Yes.
What do you think the Canadian government should do now, given this turn of events in the United States on EVs? What should we be doing in this country?
Well, I don't believe that EVs are the future. And I've been driving an EV for 4 years.
Okay.
And I love it. It's great. It's great for my lifestyle. It won't work for everybody. We will see gas engines 30 years from now. The electric is not the answer. And I don't think government should be funding anything. The companies will build what consumers will buy.
So if industry believes that electric is the future, let industry fund it.
Absolutely.
Without subsidies from the government.
Absolutely.
Okay.
This corporate welfare has got to stop.
Okay. All right. Do you have any thoughts about bringing back a program like CERB or a wage subsidy?
Absolutely not.
Okay. What if it's American businesses that are paying for the program through tariff income? You don't buy it? No?
That's never going to happen.
Never going to happen? It's been floated out there just in the last week and a half or so.
If you believe anything that comes out of Ottawa, I got a bridge to tell you in Arizona.
Okay. All right. Not really in the market for a bridge right now, but I do appreciate your insight. Thank you, Keith.
This battery infrastructure that they funded, that's a waste of money.
Waste of money. Okay. I've been told, look, if we don't do this, we're not going to have an auto sector in 5 years. We have to do this or that we won't even have an auto sector in this country.
If a business is set to survive and is run accordingly, it will survive. And if it's not, it won't. And if it's not, it won't. It's as simple as that.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Keith. Good to hear from you today. All right. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Just like that, we're on our way. And it's Talkback on a Tuesday, talking about electric vehicles, talking about pandemic-style assistance programs to help hard-hit Canadian workers and businesses if they find themselves falling on tough times because of tariffs. That is in the news today in a major report in the Globe and Mail. Have your say on that as well. 1-833-668-2577. It's Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Should Canadian governments, plural, federal and provincial, reverse course on the many investments they have made to build the electric vehicle supply chain in Canada, given what we're hearing from the Trump administration, reversing course on many of the Biden administration policies on EVs? And we're also asking, would you support pandemic-style assistance programs like the CERB and the wage subsidy to help Canadian workers impacted by U.S. tariffs, something that's been floated today in the news media? Matthew in Calgary, you're up next. Matthew, on EVs. What do you think Canada should do now on EVs?
Hey, Rob, the first-time caller.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I heard the question asked, and I felt compelled to call in. I work in financial services, but I actually spent 10 years in automotive, and seeing the technology increase, on the emission standards, just on your standard combustion engines, it's come a long way as well too. But on the EV side, I look at the plus and the minus of both situations. Plus, obviously there's a huge low-cost maintenance also that has to be factored into the conversation. That would really help bolster people's pocketbooks. There's lots of tax incentives, nothing specific that I want to talk about, but there's tax incentives for purchasing EVs, and they come with great technology. From people that I know, they're great for short commutes, and to that point too, with the talk of creating battery factories. Well, that's jobs to the economy, and that's always a good thing. But on the negative side, I look at it. It's shrouded in zero emissions, right? And what we have to extract from the earth and the carbon impact from creating these batteries and the materials to create these vehicles. Are we actually getting ahead and solving what Ottawa believes is to be helpful towards towards a greener future.
Right.
In Canada, we have some cold performance. Batteries don't like the cold. So we have an issue with performance, and if you read on Reddit and other online forums, it's just draped in complaints. I firmly believe we have a capacity with regards to our electrical grid. If we were to meet this mandate, I think it's a pie in the sky mandate that if we switch everything over to EV, we don't have the capacity to do it, especially when most of our energy is produced with coal fire, especially in the West. Something to look at is the emergence of hydrogen combustion. Hydrogen combustion, what is the byproduct of that? It's water vapor. You can see Toyota, BMW, Honda shifting gears.
Just because I have some other calls I don't want to get to. So what do you think? I mean, it's been a lot of money. I mean, it's in excess of $50 billion has been committed to this venture.
And
is it time to rethink it given what is happening in the United States?
Absolutely, I think
okay.
We should.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Matthew. I'm going to move along. I want to take Kevin's call in Woodstock. Kevin, if you don't get to finish your thought, I'll bring you on back after the news. But go ahead, Kevin, on EVs. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the money that they give Volkswagen to build that battery plant in St. Thomas, where are they going to sell the batteries to? Does Volkswagen build anything in Canada? Volkswagen is shutting down a lot of, 3 of their big plants in Germany. We're not going to get any of this money back. It's like $60 billion in Canada.
Yeah.
Do you really think that the Americans that are 10 times bigger than us would spend $600 billion on EV, just on batteries? So, and you can't walk this back. The building's almost already built.
Right. The government says it's based on production. So if they're not making batteries, they're not going to get the incentives. So the government says it's a very low-risk proposition. But if you want to come back on, just hang on through the news. I'll bring you back on. You can finish your thought, or we'll move along to the next caller. But there will be more callers on this right after the news because it's Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
The United States is changing its policies on building out the electric vehicle supply chain. The Biden administration committed a lot of funding to this, various incentive programs and whatnot, and Canada followed suit. So given the change in the United States, should Canada reverse course on some of the commitments it's made to build out the electric vehicle supply chain in Canada? That's one question, one topic that we have for you today. Another is this idea that the government is working on and making preparations for pandemic-style relief programs to help people who are impacted if there are tariffs, people who lose their jobs, factories that close. So supports for businesses, supports for workers. You think pandemic relief programs. What comes to mind? CERB, wage subsidy, CEBA loans, programs like that. Would you support bringing programs like that back? 1-833-668-2577. Jim is in Halifax. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Rob. This time yesterday, I was on a flight back from Florida. I'd spent 10 days there. So just to speak of what I saw, every Uber but one that we were in was a hybrid electric. Just keeping your eyes open, there are so many new cars down there that are hybrid electric using, battery technology. So there's a huge market. And I think our auto industry needs to be part of that market because they're very, very popular and they're efficient. We did rent a car and we had it for a week and it cost me $7 for fuel. And fuel is 2/3 of ours, right? So it's not the huge, big gap. Now, the other opportunity, of course, is there's a big void in the marketplace that's just happened, and that's the demise of Tesla. I don't know if you saw it or not, but
the demise of Tesla. What do you mean?
Well, Europeans have gone ballistic with Musk's Nazi salute, and in Holland, in Netherlands in particular, I mean, I read this in the Financial Times in the United States. In Netherlands, in particular, the Dutch are dumping their Teslas. They don't want anything to do with it. And the brand, the actual brand of Tesla, 4 weeks ago, it was the third most popular brand of automobile in the world after Honda and BMW. Tesla's now 34th in the world in brand. So I think if Tesla steps out of the market and they're making the cars in China anyway, there's huge opportunity for Canada. So, I mean, that's just my view of what I've seen in kind of quite recently. Now, with respect to your second question, I mean, I think I'd really have to be an economist to weigh in that. I just don't know enough. Okay. But what I do know is this. It's very convenient to liberal bash when they're not planning, and then it's convenient to bash when they are planning. My question is, where's Pierre Poilievre? Did he go to Greenland? I mean, at the end of the day...
he's in Atlantic Canada, actually. Last time I saw him interviewed, he was in Atlantic Canada just a couple of days ago.
I follow news online, but I haven't seen anything from him. I haven't seen anything relative to planning. But he's got to be in election mode, and to be quite frank, 8 out of 10 people in this region don't like Poilievre. So he's got to come out and start talking about what he's going to do. He's got to start talking about his plan. And I think, and I would like to see you be as
well. He had an interview on the CTV News in Atlantic Canada over the weekend with Todd Battis, where he explained, I mean, for about 8 minutes, what he thought Canada should do with the tariff threat.
Okay, so I was away, so I missed that. But you know what I'm saying. Okay. It's time for him to get out and become a parent, because it's quite conceivable that there could be a repeat of Harper's regime, where Harper won a minority government, Carney could win a minority government, and then go on for a couple of majorities. So I just don't think it's clear, cut, and dry. I would like to see vocal, very vocal wording of what he wants to do. But anyway, these are complex issues. I will say most Americans very, very polite. Very little talk of politics. Many of the group that we were at a wedding, so many of the group that we were with were, they were very disappointed in the direction of the country. I really only talked to one diehard kind of
MAGA guy.
Government. And I just agreed that I was a guest in their country, and I really didn't feel comfortable. I felt, United States of America is a great country, and it just wasn't a place to talk to them about those things. I said, if you'd like to come to Canada,
I got you.
We can speak freely. Thanks, Rob.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. Interesting to take your call, especially since you're just back from there. But that's really, really great that you called today. Thank you. Jim in Halifax today. To Red Deer, George is up next. Hi, George.
How's it going today?
It goes, sir. With or without me, it goes. Could be a little warmer, but, we're suffering through it.
We're in Canada. You got to take whatever we get.
I guess. They're giving everything it's got. So, look, on EVs, what do you think Canada should do now? I mean, there's a lot of money at stake here.
There's no sense throwing good money after bad. I mean, you can't. Okay. If it's crap and nobody wants them, then can them. To be done with it. It's like an old cow that doesn't give. You can't get no more calves out, and she doesn't milk. You can't her. Be done with it.
Okay.
Cut your losses, and that's okay. And electric cars are never going to be worked at all until you have an independent source of electricity. Like, these batteries just don't work. Because I worked on the Trans Mountain Pipeline for 5 years, right from one of the first guys there, and one of the last guys to leave.
Okay.
And I was in Edson one day, and this guy had a brand new Tesla. Now, Edson is 2 hours and change from Edmonton. And it was cold that weekend, and he was going to Jasper, which was another hour and a half past there. And the charge and the batteries would not get him from Edmonton to Jasper in the cold weather because it took so much power.
Okay, but certainly the industry is pouring a lot of money into the electric vehicle space, sir. I mean,
that money is going to circle back into Liberal coffers like it always does.
Okay.
Anytime the Liberals throw money at something, that's what happens. And
so this idea that the future of the auto industry is electric, you just don't believe that?
No, not until they come up with an electric motor that has an independent source of power. And and the other thing about the
the vehicle itself, you mean? On the vehicle itself, you mean?
On the vehicle itself. Okay. Even if it's a cold fusion generator, cold fusion, whatever, nuclear, until it's got its own power source. And on the tariffs.
Yes. Yes,
okay,
sir.
what we should be doing, Pierre Poilievre should be saying, you know what? If they don't want our stuff, that's fine. As soon as I take over, enough of this crap says in 6 months from the time I'm taken office, we're going to have shovels in the ground with Energy East, and we're going to have another bunch of shovels in the ground, Energy West. We got pipelines to both coasts. Irving's got huge refineries, building liquefied natural gas because Germany and Japan have both said they want our
stuff. He mentioned part of that. Again, I'm referencing this interview that he did in Halifax a few days ago where he went on in some length what he thinks that Canada should do in response to the Trump tariff threat. A lot of it is about building economic capacity in this country, sir. Thank you so much, but he's not ruling out retaliatory tariffs either. Thank you, George in Red Deer. Good to hear from you today. Talk back on a Tuesday. Join the discussion, will you? 1-833-668-2577. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Talking about the prospect of government assistance programs for businesses and workers that could be impacted by tariffs from the Trump administration. Those are our topics today. Join the discussion, 1-833-668-2577. Let's go to Dallas is in Cambridge, Ontario. Hello, Dallas.
Yes, sir. How you doing today?
I'm good, Dallas. Thank you.
Good. Well, I don't know. I guess I'll start off with the EV thing. Yes. I don't drive. I haven't for a number of years for complicated reasons. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Nonetheless,
yes.
The EV thing, yes, it makes sense, and on the other hand, it doesn't. We've been investing in auto plants for the last 50 years. Billions and billions of dollars, and yes, they bring in billions and billions of dollars. But at the end of the day, I'm not so sure about this EV thing. Now we have, as one of your previous callers said, idle construction sites, which, hey, do they ever take off? And if they don't, what do we do with it? That money's gone. And, anyways, I could go on for hours about it, but I'm not going to bore you.
Okay. Well, I don't have hours anyway. But,
well, no, I get that. As far as the
bringing back programs like CERB or whatever. If people are really hard hit by
that idea
tariffs.
goes.
Yes.
You know something? Anytime I was ever laid off from a job or whatever the case may be, we got a program called EI.
Yes.
And that's all I got to say about that.
So we don't need CERB. That's what employment insurance is for. That's why people pay premiums for employment insurance, right?
Well,
that's what you would say. Yeah.
Okay. And as far as it's some major catastrophe on the horizon, maybe it is. I don't know. We went through a few recessions. Back in the day, we went through the Great Depression. What did people have to rely on? Not billions of dollars handed out that we don't have to spend. And that's about all I got to say.
Okay, well, very clearly they're thinking about it, and that's why I wanted to bring it up today. This is really the second time that such an initiative has been floated in the news media, today in the Globe and Mail, and then with Chrystia Freeland and an opinion piece in the Washington Post not that long ago. I think what they're envisioning is, the Trump tariffs are going to hit. We will do retaliatory tariffs. The government would collect revenue from American businesses shipping their products into the United States. One of the claims that was out there is if it's targeted in the right way, the federal government could raise something like $150 billion. And you would use that money to fund programs that look like CERB or look like a wage subsidy program, or maybe even look like some kind of CEBA loan program, and you help them, weather the storm, weather the tariff storm, without creating some giant crater in the federal budget that it already has a $62 billion hole in it. I think that's kind of what we're in the early days of seeing potentially unfold here. And I'm just asking, well, what do you think of an idea like that? 1-833-668-2577. We do have lines available. The wait won't be too long. Fit you in before the top of the hour news. Love to hear from you today. Join the discussion. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Well, Donald Trump's second term as U.S. president is just 8 days old, but he is really shaking things up. He signed an executive order that will end what some called an electric vehicle sales mandate that was brought in by the Biden administration in the United States, and would freeze funding for for a host of other programs that were designed to roll out the EV supply chain in the United States. So in light of that, and given how much money that Canadian governments have committed to building out an EV supply chain in this country, should our governments, and I'm saying governments, federal and provincial, is it time for them to maybe rethink some of these investments given this development in the United States? 1-833-668-2577. That's one of two topics that we have on the go. The other is this idea that the government is readying pandemic-style assistance programs to help Canadians who could be hard hit by U.S. tariffs, if they lose their jobs, if their factories close, businesses close, whatever the case might be. Wage subsidy programs, CERB-style programs. Is that something you could get behind? 1-833-668-2577. Doug is in Halifax. Thanks for the call, Doug. You're on the air.
Good
Go ahead.
afternoon, Rob.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah. As far as the rebates and stuff in regards to the EVs, I think we have to follow suit with the Americans and end this demand for us to purchase nothing but electrical vehicles by 2035. I think it's just silly.
Okay.
Yeah. I wonder sometimes, I hear the people call up about, because I spoke to a guy one day who has a Tesla, and he loves it. And I asked him, would he buy a used one? I asked him if he would buy a used one. You know what he said? No. He didn't.
No,
he'd buy a new one. So I just wonder what the demand would be out there to buy a used EV that's 4 years old, 5 years old, 3 years old,
Right.
And
right.
maybe I don't know how. Did you ever buy a beater car for yourself to just get around into?
A beater car or a Beetle car?
A beater car, just
a beater
to get around to work.
A beater car, because I've had beater cars and I've had Beetles. So yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think I had a couple for $1,000, $12. I got 3-4 years of them. You're not going to do the electric vehicle. I think those electric EVs are going to be nothing but a throwaway car. I can't see anybody buying one that's 4 years old, with the batteries that could go, or the electric motors could go. It doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, that's my thought, Rob.
But you call the sales mandate, you called it silly.
It was silly for the government to try to force people into it. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because I think the Canadian manufacturer automobiles had called before Trump even put this in place. They wanted this mandate lifted anyway, because it's just not going to happen with them and especially the big three. I mean, with their priority is going to be with the U.S. cars, and they ain't going to worry about changing things around just for a few cars are going to be sold in Canada. That's my view anyway.
Okay.
What do you
Okay.
think? What do you think?
Well, I think a major motivation for Donald Trump, I mean, and he brought it up that people should have the choice of what kind of vehicle they want to drive, and they shouldn't be forced into having one choice, an electric vehicle, and a zero emission vehicle.
Right on.
They should be able to buy whatever kind of vehicle they want to buy.
Exactly. Don't continue on with the dealers if they want to make the cars and sell some cars to some people. But in this rebate for people to buy them, they want to buy a goddamn electric car, let them buy one.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Thank you. Yep. Good to hear from you. And that's hour number 1 of Talkback. That is in the books. I'm just suggesting to you, given what we're hearing from the Trump administration about the commitment to electric vehicle production and that supply chain, does it still make sense for Canada to have very similar policies that promote the build out of that industry and that would mandate the sale of electric vehicles? In this country, it's by the year 2035. Does it still make sense for the federal government and governments like the government of Ontario, the government of Quebec, or British Columbia to provide such lucrative incentives to automakers in other countries to try and get them to move here and build factories for the electric vehicle supply chain? Because they seem to be in reverse in the United States on that.
It's time to talk back
on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
and have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
So a couple of topics that are in the mix, very timely today. Electric vehicles is one of them. Government aid for businesses and workers that could be sideswiped by tariffs. Should the Canadian government reverse course on the many investments that they have made to build out an electric vehicle supply chain in Canada? Would you say, the United States is changing strategy, so we have to adapt to the new administration in the United States? Plus, it's a lot of money. I mean, all told, in excess of $50 billion. Or the future of the auto industry is electric, and if Canada wants to build cars, it has to build electric vehicles. That's the way the industry is going. So a couple of ways to look at things there. And a second topic, I'm really interested in getting your take on this today, because this is the second or the third time that I've seen something like this in the news media. Would you support pandemic-style assistance programs, a CERB, wage subsidy to help workers impacted by U.S. tariffs? I mean, what do you think about this idea? Bringing back the CERB. Apparently, these are where discussions are at right now, or bringing back something like the wage subsidy program that was in place during the pandemic, apparently on the table, according to the news today. I raised this prospect a few weeks ago. Didn't get a lot of takers on it at the time, not getting a lot today. I'm surprised by that, given the money that is involved and given the fiscal situation of the government right now and the politics of it all. 1-833-668-2577. This was kind of a small piece of information that came out of the First Minister's meeting not that long ago. The one when all the news actually, in the end, it ended up being about Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. You remember her refusal to sign the statement that all the other premiers signed, and she was accused of not being a team player and all of this stuff. But this little nugget got buried under all of that news, even though if it comes to pass, think of the price tag. When the government is already running a massive budget deficit of more than $60 billion. But it was Wab Kinew, the NDP Premier of Manitoba, who kind of floated this out there to a news reporter at a downtown hotel in Ottawa and let it slip that one of the things they're talking about in these First Ministers meetings is the idea of bringing back pandemic support programs for workers and businesses that could be hit by U.S. tariffs. And I was thinking, well, that cost taxpayers a whole lot of money when we did that the last time around. So I would certainly like to know more. And, lo and behold, front page story in the Globe and Mail today about it. Although what it would actually cost is never revealed, but this is what the story says. Quote, the federal government is planning a multi-billion-dollar pandemic-style bailout bailout for workers and businesses if U.S. President Donald Trump follows through on his threat to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian goods as early as February 1st, two sources say. And then it goes on and it says, quote, the government expects U.S. tariffs could lead to mass layoffs and drive up the cost of goods for consumers. Canadian companies will likely respond not only by cutting jobs, but by curtailing production. Businesses would lose money and some would have to close. And then it says, quote, the sources said the emergency measures would help Canadians pay for rent and groceries and allow businesses to pay bills and meet payroll. So think about what the government did during the pandemic. What did it do to help Canadians pay the rent and buy groceries? It had the CERB program, right? $2,000 a month. What programs did the government have to help businesses pay bills and help businesses meet payrolls? Well, it had programs like the wage subsidy, CEWS, Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program. It had the loan program, CEBA loan program. Maybe that's on the table. This story doesn't say what programs are being considered, but you don't have to use your imagination because we all just went through this a few years ago. Chrystia Freeland, the former finance minister, hinted at this in an opinion piece that she had in the Washington Post not too long ago, as she continues to portray herself as someone who can stand up to Trump. And she wrote in that paper at the time that Ottawa could tariff the heck out of American products, collect billions and billions in tax revenue, and use the money from the tariffs on U.S. imports to fund income relief programs for Canadian workers. And her figures at the time were Ottawa would collect about $150 billion in tariffs on U.S. goods going to the government of Canada. And she claimed that would be enough money to give every Canadian making less than $150,000 a year some income support of about $2,700, and then still have half the money left over. That was her claim. So maybe this is what the government is thinking about. Whatever money is spent on giving income support or support to businesses could come from the tariffs collected on U.S. imports. Maybe that's what they're thinking about. I don't know. And this news story in the Globe and Mail, it doesn't say. But, I mean, Chrystia Freeland was the finance minister just, a month ago or so. I suspect she still knows a lot of people in the Department of Finance. So I doubt that her numbers were just kind of plucked out of thin air. Maybe that's what they're thinking about. Maybe the Americans are paying for CERB. And Americans are paying for a wage subsidy and a CEBA loan program to help Canadians weather the tariff storm. I don't know if that would make it more palatable to you. You let me know at 1-833-668-2577. More of your calls are just ahead, and EVs, of course, another hot topic today. I'm Rob Snow, hour number 2 of Talkback, and this is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Well, what should we do with our EV strategy in Canada now that Donald Trump seems to be reversing course on a lot of the EV policies of the Biden administration? A lot of money on the line in Canada, a lot of promises made. Let's go to Bob is up next in Kitchener. Wants to talk about EVs. Hi there, Bob.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Bob.
So how are you, sir?
I'm okay, Bob. How are you?
Okay.
That's good. That's good.
I think we should invest in electric vehicles.
Okay.
Because unlike Donald Trump, climate change isn't going to go away.
Okay.
And the tariffs was the same threat he had the first time he ran, and they worked out a little better deal. So I think it's going to be about the same thing.
That all of this will eventually be negotiated at the bargaining table or what have you. Okay. All right.
And I wonder how popular gas-powered engines were when they first came out. Everybody's talking about how popular electric vehicles are. Wonder if what people were about them when they first came out, started to roll out the assembly line.
Right. Well, I mean, do you think that we were at the beginning of some kind of new era when it comes to transportation? That there was kind of a horse and buggy, and then the gas powered car came along and replaced the horse and buggy, and and now we're in the kind of the dying days of the internal combustion engine, and the industry is going electric. Is that what you think?
It's not going to happen right away, but I think it's going to happen.
No, but I mean, electric vehicles have been for sale for a long time now.
Yeah, I know.
Like, this is hardly a new thing, right?
Like I said, but climate change isn't going to go away, so we have to do something.
Have to do something. So you view it as an important kind of climate change policy. Yeah. You do?
I do, yeah.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, it's $50 billion or so that's been committed to this by the federal government and various provincial governments. A lot of money on the line.
Yeah, but back in, was it 70s, who used to help support the oil sands to us finally started to... I mean, so it's not the first time we spent money.
Well, the governments support all kinds of businesses, but that's another conversation altogether. Does government have any business supporting business at all through various subsidies?
Help them
whether that's the oil and gas industry or the automotive industry or the aerospace industry or the media or whatever, right?
Well, I think it would help to create jobs. I mean, if you don't, you pay it on unemployment.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Bob. Good to hear from you. Bob thinks it's probably nothing to panic about anyway, because things will be negotiated eventually at the bargaining table. Let's be optimistic here, I guess. Robert in Calgary up next. Robert. Hello, Robert.
Hi, Rob Snow.
Yes, Robert. Good to hear from you today.
Yeah, I'd like to start by saying I wish that 80% of all Canadians would listen to your show.
Me too.
That would help a lot. The thing about the EV car there, well, okay, yes. I guess it's an idea. If we bring it up to the climate change perspective, well, if you look into history, there's been more than one climate change and disasters throughout the millions of years of planet that we had.
Right.
Also, about a year ago, there was I think that was last year. There was a hurricane in Florida, and there was a guy from Quebec, I think you are Ontario, one or the other, that was in Florida with an EV car, but they had to evacuate. Well, it turned out to be a problem.
Yes.
You got to imagine that you're in a traffic jam, and then you got to plug. Well, when I gas up, it takes me a few minutes, but when you plug, it takes a lot longer. And you got to evacuate the area. That is one topic. I can bring up another one. Here in Alberta, we had a forest fire in Fort Mac. 80,000 people had to evacuate. Complete traffic jam. Well, if you want to evacuate with an EV and you forgot to plug the car the day before, what are you going to do?
You're gonna have problems. Well, I can tell you, my father, for example, lives in Nova Scotia. They were pretty hard hit by Fiona when the hurricane hit Nova Scotia. My father's place was without power. I don't know, it was 7 or 8 days or something. I mean,
and
what do you do if you don't? What do you, he doesn't have a Tesla or anything like that. He has a little Hyundai, but what do you do if you can't charge your car for 8 days? Right?
If you don't have a second vehicle to build,
sure, So that's been brought up before.
If they want to build their stuff. But then if you look at the Americans, if they're backing away, well, as far as I'm concerned, they're way smarter than our dumbass Trudeau. Okay? Because they probably know something that he doesn't know.
Okay.
And, to me, my opinion, Trudeau is the biggest idiot that we ever had as a prime minister.
Okay. And, well, that's here nor there for today's discussion. We have, it's not just Mr. Trudeau who's, we had Doug Ford in Ontario is a big believer in this. The Quebec government poured all kinds of money into this electric vehicles. They're supposed to have plants in British Columbia. A lot of premiers are buying into the EV revolution. They're changing course in the United States. Should we have a rethink of these policies here is what I'm asking.
if you look in the past, Canada has been jumping in the boat way faster than everybody else for some reason. And another example would be when they change everything to kilometers and kilograms and blah, blah, blah. Well, the way it went is the Canadian decided, well, we're going to get it before the Americans. So they decided to go from point A to point C. So they spent all the money that they could to change everything in Canada to kilometers, and they reached point B. And when they reached point B, they realized, well, Canadian doesn't want it. It doesn't work on construction. We have to change everything. Like construction we still don't have T-squared to cut a drywall at 48 inches.
Okay. We're wandering a little bit off the topic here. So I'm going to let you go because there are other calls I want to get to. But I thank you for your kind words today, Robert, in Calgary. And you're absolutely right that more people should listen to this show. Truer words have never been said. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
EV strategies, EV policies in this country. Is it time for a rethink? What do you think of the idea of bringing back pandemic-style assistance programs to help workers and businesses that could be hard hit by tariffs? There's talk out there about that. John is in Kitchener. Hello, John. You're up next, John. What's your opinion?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, John. Thank you.
Good. Just on this tariff business,
Yes.
I believe that the United States is already getting a really good deal importing anything from Canada because you have to look at how much a dollar costs.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
And the other side to that is if Mr. Trump is going to put in this 25% and we're going to retaliate, I would retaliate at 65%. 25 for the tariff and 40% on the value of the dollar. Because
on the currency exchange, yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, really? That just doesn't make sense to me what they're talking about. I would impose a 65% tariff, that's for sure. And the other thing I wanted to say is that one more thing is that we should not be buying American wines. We have great wines from both British Columbia and Ontario. The VQA stuff is unbelievable. We don't need their wine. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you. I don't think we ever really addressed our two topics today, but that's okay. If you just want to talk in more general terms about this tariff. Luke in Calgary, you're up next, Luke. Thanks for calling. You're on the air, Luke. Go ahead.
I wanted to, I guess it's kind of tricky for me. I've been expecting the government to just find excuses to print money for about since basically 2008. This has kind of been coming, in my opinion, anyways, and several other people who know more about this stuff than me. It's got, as far as I can tell, it really has nothing to do with the pandemic. It has nothing to do with the tariffs that are coming. Okay, it has, again, to me, it has everything to do with the fact that this is a fiat currency system, and regardless of the federal government stripes, they've all been irresponsible with spending money, and it's so hard. I'm not an expert in this field, but it's just they have to print more money. They can't not print more money. They just need excuses to do it now, and this is a great reason to do it.
And why do they need to print more money? Like, why do they need to print more money?
So it's a fiat currency system, and we run on debt now, right? The banking sector, everything runs on debt. So we're always in a deficit.
Right.
Everyone's
so the
in a
only
deficit,
way to meet
right?
the only way to meet. I've heard this kind of thing before, especially before there was Bitcoin. This is a big thing from gold bugs that you would hear that gold is the only store of value, for example. So because of outstanding obligations, deficits, national debts, unfunded liabilities, Social Security, pensions, healthcare, all this stuff.
You name it.
The only way the government is ever going to be able to afford to fund any of that is through a devalued currency, right?
Right. It's a race to zero.
Race to the bottom. Yeah, I got you. Thank you. Thank you. Again, a little outside of the meat of the topic, but maybe we can circle back to it when we return right after the latest breaking news on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
It sure is, where we have been talking about what EV policy should look like in this country and what sort of assistance programs, if any, should be available to workers, to businesses that could be hit by the U.S. tariffs. I mean, in the United States, Donald Trump signed an executive order, and it calls for an end to what he calls an electric vehicle sales mandate in that country. There are questions to what extent the United States had an electric vehicle sales mandate. The goal of the Biden administration was to have 50% of new vehicles sold in the United States be electric or zero emission by the year 2030. 5 years from now. Wasn't legally binding, however. But whatever it was, Donald Trump wants to get rid of it. And one of the reasons he says he's in favor of getting rid of it is because, well, first of all, consumer choice. Americans should be able to buy whatever kind of vehicle they want to buy, in his opinion. Now, the Biden administration, under something called the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, offered big incentives to consumers who purchased electric vehicles, the equipment that you need at home, the charging equipment, and big incentives to companies to build EV component factories in the United States, like batteries and other parts for EVs. And when the Biden administration did that, that's when the floodgates really opened up here. And the Canadian government, led by Mr. Trudeau, alongside various provincial governments, decided they had to match that sort of incentive regime or be left behind. And I remember speaking to Vic Fedeli, cabinet minister in the Ford government, trade minister in Ontario, Vic Fedeli, and he told me, if we don't do this, Rob, we're not going to have an auto sector in 5 years. And I mean, the numbers are eye-watering, the incentives, when you add up the federal money and the provincial incentive programs, in excess of $50 billion. Now, the people in government say, very little risk here, very little risk here. Maybe that's true. You can draw your own conclusions. But they are adamant that these incentives are all based on production. In other words, if these companies don't keep people employed for so many years, or if they don't meet targets on battery production, for example, they don't qualify for the incentives. They only qualify for the incentives if targets about things like employment and component production are actually met. That's how it's been explained to me. But one of the other reasons that I was told, again, by very, very smart people on this show, is that we need to have our trade policy in the auto sector, especially aligned with the United States, because of the integration and the interconnectedness of the auto industry between Canada and the United States. So if the Americans are going to pour tens of billions of dollars into EV production, provide all kinds of incentives to lure manufacturing there, the thinking was, here we have to do the same thing, no choice. If we don't, we kiss our auto sector goodbye. And that also pairs with the decision to have 100% tariffs on EVs that are made in China. And I think that's probably a policy that's going to continue under the Trump administration. I don't see Americans being able to buy cheap Chinese EVs anytime soon, not with Donald Trump in the Oval Office. But now that the Trump administration is reversing course on its EV policy, is it time to rethink some of this? 1-833-668-2577. Doug is in Calgary. You're up next, Doug. Thank you for calling, Doug. You're on the air.
Hi, Rob. How are you today?
I'm good, Doug. Thank you.
Good. So,
good.
With it, as far as the EVs go, I don't think the government should be subsidizing them. I think if these EVs are so great and, they're saying everybody should have one, then let's let the market work and they should sell themselves.
Yes. That if this really is the way of the future, then let industry put its money where its mouth is. Why does it have to be our money, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to clarify with you is you talked about the $50 billion. Is that $50 billion in EV production facilities or battery plants?
It's components, it's battery plants, it's charging infrastructure, the whole supply chain strategy.
Right.
The entire supply chain strategy.
It's actually not really helping the auto industry because the money is not going to the auto industry to make the electric vehicles.
Well, I mean, I guess you is it going to, say, the big three or what have you? It's more going to component manufacturers, I guess, right? Yeah. And battery plants. But a lot of like, for example, the Stellantis thing in Southern Ontario was a partnership with another company, right?
Right.
That has maybe more expertise than Stellantis does in some of the electric components, as far as I understand it.
So the real benefit then for people that want these EVs is the government rebates that they were giving for people that bought the EVs, and I think that's gone away now.
Okay, so do you think we should change our strategy here? I mean, this is a huge industrial strategy,
yes.
In Southern Ontario.
Would be my vote would be yes, let's change our strategy. If this government doesn't start moving quickly on different things and making better decisions, we're going to all be in serious trouble.
Okay, thank you so much for your call today. I mean, another narrative that is out there on this whole thing is that this is futile anyway, and North America and Europe has already lost the EV battle. China won it. It wasn't even close. They had first mover advantage. Can't compete on things like labor standards and input costs, and why even try to compete with the made in China EV? And all of this is just a giant waste of money in the name of being green. Danveer in Calgary up next. Danveer, you're on the air. Go ahead. Actually, Danveer, just hang on the line. I didn't realize the time. I've got to stop here. So just, Danveer, hang on the line. We'll get to you shortly. As well, we'll talk to Sean, is in Cambridge, Ontario. Tom is also in Cambridge, Ontario. Take your call before the news at the top of the hour. This is Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Been talking about EV strategy and whether our government should reverse course on some of the moves they've made to try and build out an electric vehicle supply chain in Canada, given what we're hearing from the Trump administration in the United States. We've also been talking about the need for, well, they're being called in the news media pandemic-style assistance programs. Think CERB, wage subsidy programs that were around during the pandemic to help businesses, to help hard-hit workers. Should programs like that be resurrected to deal with tariffs? Tariffs that, according to the White House press briefing today from the new White House press secretary, still online for February 1st, on track for February 1st. This is some new audio into us here. Go ahead, David.
Can you give us an update on the president's plan for his tariff agenda? He spoke a lot about this yesterday, and there's a couple of dates coming up that he's spoken to. Number one, February 1st, he's alluded to both the potential for tariffs for Canada and Mexico, but also China to take effect on those days. What's he thinking about that?
Yeah.
Should those countries expect that?
Again, he was asked and answered this question this past weekend when he took a lot of questions from the press, and he said that the February 1st date for Canada and Mexico still holds.
Okay, so that's Saturday. And then Doug Ford is going to hit the campaign trail tomorrow. The Ontario premier calling a snap election 2.5 years after the last election in Ontario. He has called the snap election because he says he needs a mandate from the people to deal with Trump. And this is what Premier Ford was saying about tariffs today.
Well, what I'll tell the people of Ontario, we're going to see an unprecedented attack to our families, to our businesses, to our communities, something that we've never seen in the history of the country, getting economically attacked by the largest country in the world, the most powerful person in the world when it comes to President Trump. And we're going to be there for him. We're going to support the people. We're going to protect the people, protect their jobs, protect communities, protect businesses, just like we did during the pandemic. But this is going to be more of an impact. The pandemic was natural around the world. This is a man targeting to attack and take every business out of Ontario, out of Canada, and try to bring it to the United States. And I'll do whatever it takes to protect the people of Ontario.
Okay. Just like the pandemic, we're going to support businesses and workers just like the pandemic. Okay. I'm just paying attention to what words are coming out of their mouths, everyone. Is Dan Veer on the line? Do we have Dan Veer on the line?
No, we lost Dan Veer.
No? Okay. Let's go to Sean in Cambridge, Ontario then. Sean. Hello, Sean.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, Sean.
I've thought about the support of the EVs for quite a while. I do not actually believe we should be subsidizing them for a couple of reasons. One is I don't think replicating our current mess with the gasoline vehicles electrically is a very good use of our funds. I mean, you look at Southern Ontario. Transportation-wise, we're a disaster. We're going to replicate this electrically. Not good. I mean, where are we going to get the power from? The 15 additional nuclear power plants we're going to need, or what?
Okay.
I mean,
okay. Where's the electricity generation infrastructure to produce all the electricity needed to fuel a fleet of electric cars in the country? Good point.
The speed we build things these days, I don't see it happening in my lifetime. And not only that, the people that buy these tend to be quite well off. They really don't need our money. We'd be better off spending our money on transit, not electric toys for the wealthy, quite frankly.
Okay. Anything else to add?
Yeah, like I said, and also any money that we sink into electric vehicles will be artificially supported. As somebody pointed out before, we're a very small country. Countries like the U.S., Europe, China, they will build their own electric plants to support their own vehicles. We can sink money into these places, into these electric plants, but it'll be short term. And as soon as the government stops supporting them, they'll be gone.
They'll leave. Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Thank you. Yeah, you've given it some thought there, Sean. Thank you. On things like rebates and whatever, I've never been really in favor of that. I can maybe buy into this idea. All electric is the way the industry is going. But if that's the case, let industry pay for it. Let industry compete for my money. Who can make the best electric car at the lowest cost, or the best electric car charging station? And if the industry thinks vehicle charging stations are going to replace the local gas station, let industry put the money up for that transition. I see where you're coming from to a certain extent there. Tom in Cambridge up next. Tom. Hi there, Tom.
How you doing, Rob?
Good, thank you.
With regards to with the tariffs coming in and the stimulus plans that they have in place now, I hope it's not going to be rolled out like it was during the pandemic. The $2,000 per person, that's a lot of money when you come to think of that. And there's,
yes. And it was for everyone over the age of 15.
Exactly. So, are you going to put some thought into this process? And that, why is it sort of anybody under $150,000 as well? And then does the company have to lay off all its employees? Could the company go back to a job sharing program again instead of working 5 days a week? Maybe you'll work 3 days a week. And you'll get supplemented on the other 2 days you're not working from that standpoint, as long as you can keep the wheels turning.
Yeah, and why do we have an EI program?
Exactly. And then why can't you combine the EI program with a provincial social service program? Why can't you combine the two for now?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Very interesting, Tom. Thank you. Yeah, you raised good points, and I'm glad that you're taking note there. We'll stop here, be right back, and we'll get some more opinions on our topics for the day on Talkback here on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Peter's on the line in Calgary, wants to talk about EV policy in this country, given what's happening with the new Trump administration in the United States. What should we be doing here in Canada, Peter? What do you think?
Okay, for EVs,
Yes.
my son's had one, so I know a little bit about it. It might be great in the cities,
Yes.
but our infrastructure can only support a limited number of these. Also, our cold weather is not conducive to the batteries. You need to preheat the batteries in order to charge them when you get down below, what was it, -10 or something like that?
Right.
Means you're using your electricity to heat your battery so you can charge it. It's not good.
Okay, but to the point, though, whether it's not good or not hasn't stopped various Canadian governments, the federal government, various provincial governments, from committing lots of money to build out a supply chain charging network, all of these things. Is it time for a rethink on that?
Oh, yeah.
Trump
You're
administration
absolutely
seems to
correct.
think
They
it's
have
time for
poured
a
money
rebate.
into their buddies to produce these things.
Okay.
But it's not conducive to Canada. Maybe if the U.S. has cars that they're building, can sell them the batteries, but not here in Canada. It's not something that it's a nice toy, and that's about it.
Okay. Thank you.
For the tariffs, the other subject.
Oh, yes, sure. Yeah. The potential for relief programs.
This is something the Liberals want. It's a great distraction.
Right, okay.
But it's a red herring. Why is it that Trump is saying about why the tariffs are going to go in?
Well, he claims it's about, the border and fentanyl and illegal immigration and things like that, right? But is that really what he thinks? Is that really?
There's only one premier that's addressing that subject. That's Alberta's premier. All the rest are wanting to get their bats out to hit the bat of Trump.
Yeah, but I mean, it's Donald Trump, so that's what he's saying today. But yesterday, he's saying something totally different, and he's saying, countries need to pay for the privilege, and to gain access to the American market, which is the best market in the world, and we're getting ripped off on trade deals. We rely too much on income tax and not enough on tariffs and all of this stuff, right?
Yeah, but where all this started was the borders, and there's only one province that is addressing that. The federal government can't because they are shut down, and a lot of the battery issues goes back to why the government is seized. Liberals paying their buddies or giving money to all the
green slush fund, and yes, the green slush fund. Yes,
we think. Yes.
I don't know if there's a direct connection between, say, the EV strategy and the green slush fund, because that was more of, again, SDTC, which is about, very early stage so-called green technology companies. But I do see what you're saying. Why would you trust the Liberals with any kind of green program or new tech involved in the environment? Look at what they did with the green slush fund, and it's a valid point. Okay, thank you for all your calls today. Very thoughtful. As usual, we'll be back tomorrow. More topics, more calls. The latest breaking news is coming up next. I'm Rob Snow, and this is News Radio.